Rana Sanga ruled Mewar with 80 physical battle scars across his body. He fought missing an eye, missing an arm, and walking with a severe limp. These injuries were the physical record of 3 decades spent at the front lines of the Sisodia dynasty's expansion. Looking at this map of 16th century northern India, you see a heavily fractured landscape of warring sultanates and rival territories. To survive here required a hardened warrior. Sanga's path to the throne began by surviving assassination attempts by his own brothers. Once crowned in 1509, he systematically dismantled rival rulers, crushing the Sultan of Delhi in multiple battles and capturing the Sultan of Malwa. Through sheer force of will and military success, he achieved the impossible. Sanga brought together fiercely independent Rajput kings and even allied with local Afghan lords to form a massive, unified coalition against external threats. That threat arrived in 1526, when a Central Asian warlord named Babur marched into Delhi. Sanga immediately moved his coalition north. In February 1527, at the fortress of Bayana, the Rajput army completely crushed Babur's vanguard. Babur's surviving soldiers were terrified, demoralized, and ready to retreat. Sanga had the invader on the run. But instead of chasing down the broken army and delivering the final blow, he stopped. For nearly a month, Sanga halted his advance to entertain peace negotiations through intermediaries. Leading a massive coalition made of dozens of independent factions, he assumed time was on his side and that Babur's isolated army would simply collapse on its own. Babur used every single day of that delay. He ordered his men to dig deep defensive trenches across the plains of Khanwa. He arranged his heavy artillery and chained the massive cannons together to form an impenetrable wall of iron. Knowing his men were terrified of the Rajputs, Babur turned to psychological warfare. He declared a holy war, shattered his wine vessels, swore off alcohol, and abolished taxes on his soldiers. When Sanga finally marched his coalition to Khanwa on March 16th, he faced a transformed enemy. Babur had turned the open plains into a fixed defensive line, anchored by chained cannons and deep-cut trenches. Look closely at the mechanical trigger and barrel of this matchlock firearm. The Battle of Khanwa was a collision of 2 completely different philosophies of war. The Rajput coalition relied on traditional battlefield valor, individual duels, and the sheer physical momentum of war elephants. Babur relied on centralized command and gunpowder. When the Rajputs launched their massive frontal assault, Babur's cannons opened fire. The deafening explosions and thick smoke terrified the Rajput war elephants. Panicking, the massive animals spun around and charged backward, trampling hundreds of their own soldiers. Babur executed the Tulugma tactic, sending mobile cavalry in a wide arc to pinch the flanks of Sanga's massive army. As pressure peaked, Sanga's vanguard commander suddenly defected. He turned his 35,000 cavalry against his allies, tearing open the Rajput front line from the inside. Desperate to rally his collapsing coalition, Maharana Sanga pushed his elephant directly into the center of the fighting. This made him a highly visible target. An arrow struck him squarely in the head, knocking him completely unconscious. His bodyguards immediately evacuated him from the field. In a coalition built on personal loyalty, seeing the royal elephant empty was a death sentence. The alliance instantly fractured and the soldiers fled. A systemic, centralized military structure had just dismantled an army built on personal heroism. When Sanga regained consciousness miles away in the village of Baswa, he realized what had happened. Despite his shattered army and his own catastrophic new injuries, he swore an oath to never step foot in his capital of Chittor until he had defeated Babur. He immediately began planning another campaign. But his own nobles were exhausted. Having faced the devastation of Babur's cannons, they were terrified of marching into that artillery fire again. In 1528, rather than fight Babur, his own commanders poisoned him. A warrior who survived a lifetime of assassination attempts and 80 brutal battlefield wounds was finally killed by his closest allies, simply because they feared another confrontation with modern weaponry. The defeat at Khanwa permanently broke the fragile unity of the Rajput and Afghan alliance. With all coordinated resistance erased, Babur laid the unshakable foundation for the Mughal Empire, locking in a dynasty that would dominate India. Khanwa demonstrated that battlefield courage alone could no longer withstand military engineering and centralized command. This defeat fragmented the Rajput alliance, clearing the only major obstacle to the establishment of long-term Mughal rule in India.